If you've ever followed gardening advice exactly and your plant still struggled, the problem might not be you. It might be the climate that advice was written for. You see, a good chunk of the gardening wisdom circulating around is often based on cooler or drier conditions, not quite considering the unique challenges that come with gardening in hot, humid climates. Parts of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, or even Florida that are in hot and humid zone 9A could use a different set of rules, and that's what we're here to discuss today. We're going to dive into 5 common gardening rules that, well, don't quite hit the mark when it comes to gardening in these warmer, muggier conditions. But don't worry, we're not just going to leave you hanging. We'll also be exploring what actually works in these climates, debunking the myths and setting you on a path to thriving gardens. Today, we're going to look at 5 gardening rules that don't work well in hot, humid climates, and what works better instead. In humid climates, plants spaced too closely trap moisture and reduce airflow. This is the first rule of standard plant spacing that many gardeners swear by, but it doesn't always work well in hot, humid climates like those of Zone 9A. You see, when plants are too cozy, they create a damp environment that's a playground for fungal diseases. These diseases love to hitch a ride on the moisture and spread from leaf to leaf, plant to plant. So, what's the solution? Well, it's quite simple. Give your plants room to breathe. Space them out a little more than you might see on the seed packet. This allows for better airflow, which in turn helps to keep those pesky fungal diseases at bay. And for those climbing crops like cucumbers and beans, consider growing them on trellises. This not only saves on horizontal space, but also improves airflow around the plants. In many cases, it helps to give plants more space and grow climbing crops on trellises to improve airflow. Full sun in the Gulf South can be much more intense than in cooler regions. Sure, most plants love sunlight. It's their primary energy source after all. However, when we talk about full sun in our hot, humid zone 9A, it's a whole different ballgame. The intensity of the sunlight coupled with the sweltering temperatures can be too much for some crops. Just picture yourself under the relentless sun at high noon without a shade in sight. Not a pretty picture, right? That's how your plants feel too. Now, imagine if you had a nice big umbrella shielding you from the harsh afternoon sun. That's what we're suggesting for your plants. Let them bask in the morning sun when it's still relatively cool. As the day heats up, provide them with some light afternoon shade. This gives them a break from the blistering heat, reducing stress and potential damage. Remember, some crops benefit from morning sun and light afternoon shade during extreme heat. In humid climates, watering every day can actually cause problems. Now, that might sound a bit counterintuitive. After all, don't plants need water to grow? Well, they sure do, but here's the catch. Too much of a good thing can sometimes lead to not-so-good outcomes. In hot, humid climates, like those in Zone 9A, the soil often stays wet longer than in cooler or drier regions. This is because the high humidity slows down the rate of evaporation. So, when you water your plants every day, the soil doesn't get a chance to dry out. And when soil stays wet for too long, it increases the risk of root rot and fungal disease. Root rot is a condition that, as the name suggests, causes the roots of a plant to rot or decay. It's usually caused by a fungus that thrives in conditions where there is too much moisture and not enough oxygen. The same goes for many other fungal diseases. They love the damp, and they'll seize any opportunity to set up shop in your garden if you provide them with a consistently wet environment. But fear not. There's a simple solution to this problem. Instead of watering your plants every day, try deep watering at the base of the plants. Deep watering involves applying water slowly, allowing it to soak down to the root zone of the plant. This encourages the plant to develop a deep, strong root system, which in turn makes it more resistant to dry spells and pests. Not only does deep watering help to prevent root rot and fungal diseases, but it also conserves water. You see, when you water lightly and frequently, much of the water is lost to evaporation before it can reach the roots of the plant. But by watering deeply, you ensure that the water goes where it's needed most, to the roots. So the next time you reach for that watering can or hose, remember, It's not about how often you water, but how deeply. Deep watering at the base of plants is usually more effective. It's a simple change, but one that can make a big difference in the health and productivity of your garden. Many gardening guides assume well-drained soil, but here's the thing, not all soils are created equal. Especially if you're a gardener in the Gulf South, you might be familiar with a little something we call heavy clay soil. Now, this type of soil has a knack for holding onto water, much like a sponge. So if you're following advice meant for well-drained soil, you might find your plants struggling in waterlogged conditions. So what can you do about it? You might be thinking, well, I can't change the soil, can I? But guess what? You absolutely can. The most effective solution for improving heavy clay soil is to add compost. Compost is this magical ingredient that not only enriches the soil with nutrients, but also improves its structure. When you mix compost into heavy clay soil, it breaks up the dense clay particles, making the soil lighter and fluffier. This allows water to drain more efficiently, preventing your plants from drowning in soggy soil. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Composting sounds like a lot of work. And it can be, but it doesn't have to be. You can start small, composting kitchen scraps like coffee grounds and vegetable peelings. Or, if you prefer a less hands-on approach, you can buy ready-made compost from your local garden center. Another option is to use raised beds. Raised beds give you complete control over the soil your plants grow in. You can fill them with a pre-made soil mix, ensuring it has the right balance of drainage and water retention. Plus, raised beds have the added bonus of making your garden easier to manage. No more bending over to tend to your plants. So, there you have it, folks. Don't let heavy clay soil get in the way of your gardening dreams. By improving your soil with compost or using raised beds, you can create a thriving garden, even in the challenging conditions of the Gulf South. Remember, improving soil with compost or using raised beds can greatly improve drainage. Planting calendars written for cooler climates often don't match Zone 9A conditions. You see, in the world of gardening, timing is everything. But here's the catch. The timing that works for a gardener in Maine won't necessarily work for a gardener in Mississippi. Why? Well, that's because the growing seasons are different. In our hot and humid Zone 9A, spring shows up early, often in February, and the intense summer heat can arrive as early as May. This means we have to adjust our planting schedules accordingly. So instead of following a national planting calendar, it's better to follow a local planting guide, or better yet, learn to read the signs of nature. For instance, when the pecan trees start to bud, it's usually safe to start planting warm season crops. Remember, gardening is not a one-size-fits-all deal. Spring arrives earlier and summer heat arrives quickly, so planting windows are usually earlier. Gardening advice isn't wrong. It's often written for a different climate. Remember, standard rules, whether they're about plant spacing, sun exposure, watering routines, soil types, or planting calendars, might not always work in your favor if you're in a hot, humid climate like Zone 9A. We've seen how plants in humid climates need more space to prevent the spread of diseases. We've learned that some crops need a break from the intense sun. We've understood that overwatering can be harmful, and how the heavy clay soils in the Gulf South need some tweaking. And let's not forget, the planting windows here are unique. In essence, successful gardening in Zone 9A doesn't mean following the rules to a T, but adapting them to suit the unique conditions of your climate. When you adjust spacing, watering, soil, and timing for hot, humid conditions, gardening becomes much easier.